Здравствуйте, товарищи, and welcome to my video review of Victoria 2, Paradox's newest grand strategy title. And if you watched my video preview, you would know that Victoria 2 doesn't really have a story, kind of like most games do. In fact, Victoria 2 lets you write the story. It gives you the paper of 19th century and early 20th century Europe. You choose a country of your choice and the game says, okay, you get to write history as you see fit. Now, how you write history is generally speaking up to you. There are of course some limitations, but do you want to turn Germany into a communist nation? You can do that. Do you want to have the Confederate States of America win the Civil War? You can do that. Do you want to have your empire rule the world through a diplomatic series of alliances, taking smaller nations into your sphere of influence and using them as pawns? You can do that. Do you want to just crush your enemies through brutal, blunt force and military might? You can do that as well. The wealth of options and variety that Victoria 2 gives you in order to rewrite history is one of its strongest points. Now, because Victoria 2 is so open, that comes at the expense of some structure, and in this case, that structure is historical events. For example, I never saw a historical event happen that started World War I. Yes, I would have, France and Russia declare war on me, but there was never just an event that started the greatest conflict, or one of the greatest conflicts in mankind's history, more rather. As well as I never saw some important events happen worldwide. I never saw the Crimean War happen. I never saw the American Civil War happen unless I was playing as America. I never saw Canada become its own country on, the historically allotted date, and I never saw Australia become its own country. And in a way that can be good, because that leaves history completely up to the player and how they want to write it. There's no, algorithms in the background telling them, how things are going to happen. But to me, I would have liked to see those events happen. I would have liked to see World War I happen. I would have liked to see the Crimean War happen. And because they didn't, that left me a little bit disheartened. Now, as I said in my video preview, Victoria 2 has you taking control of the government of any nation in the world. And as the government, you're going to be doing things like concluding diplomatic deals and influencing other nations, recruiting your army and conducting maneuvers in wartime, balancing the budget and deciding what you're going to spend your money on and how much you're going to spend on it. As well as, depending on your ruling party, you might also be conducting the production of your country as well. And everything you do affects your country a lot more indirectly than it does in other grand strategy titles. You can't directly intervene in your nation and choose who's going to be doing what job and how much they're going to be doing it. What you can do, however, is encourage people to take certain jobs over others. So if you need more laborers, you can increase the wages of laborers and encourage more of them in certain provinces, or you need more people teaching your country to increase the literacy rate, you can increase the payment of your clergymen. Now, deciding what you're going to do as your government and how you're going to do it is the best part of Victoria 2. And thankfully, it's the court part of Victoria 2. I was just having so much fun deciding whether or not I'm going to use diplomacy to influence these smaller German nations into my confederacy so I can unite the German people under one banner, or am I just going to take them over through the sword? I loved deciding whether or not I'm going to spend my money on military or education or social spending. This core aspect of Victoria 2 is expertly crafted and plays out brilliantly, and I just couldn't get enough of it. There are some problems, however, mainly with AI, and that's internally and externally. As I said in my video preview, what national party you have elected in your government is going to dictate how much you're able to intervene in the everyday goings-on. Let me tell you a story. I was playing as Prussia, and by this point I had changed from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. So I was having elections, and the people elected in a socialist-style government. And that meant I could, go and start building factories and building industry, and everything was looking good. I had a nice variety of factories all set up, lots of people working, lots of different goods being produced, and everything looked great. Next election, however, the people elected in a liberal, laissez-faire style government, and that means you can't intervene in production, in industry. That is handled by the AI, which represents these capitalist investors. And just like in real life, they have absolutely no idea how to run an economy. So I watched in horror as the AI destroyed all my factories and then would start building new factories only to destroy them seconds later. And I just watched my industrial score shrink and shrink and shrink in comparison to other nations. So I quickly kicked those guys out and put in a new socialist government. However, if you're playing as, say, the United States, you don't have the option of kicking out national parties because you're a democracy. This means if you get a laissez-faire style government, you're not able to intervene in what's going on, and this inept AI is taking care of your industrial base, and you're just gonna be sitting there and watching your nation fall behind other nations in terms of industry because these guys, just have no idea what they're doing. Also, the AI of other countries seems to neglect military research, meaning that if you focus in on military, your forces are going to be much superior to your enemies. For example, I was, again, playing as Prussia, now Germany, and in 1910, I believe it was, the Russians went to war with me. And they outnumbered me by a massive margin. They just, had like 10 soldiers to my every one. But I was just able to completely decimate them because they hadn't upgraded their military technology. My guys are much more superior and just, completely destroyed the Russians on all fronts. And I guess you could say that's historically accurate because during World War I, much smaller German forces were able to rout and destroy massive amounts of Russian troops. But when I went to turn and fight the French, they put up a much better resistance than the Russians, but my military technology was still vastly superior and I was still able to beat them pretty good. Graphics-wise, Victoria 2 is definitely the best looking Paradox game to date. Besides good looking units and ship textures and everything, what really steals the show is the map. The map is very detailed, and you can easily tell if you're fighting in a forest or on a mountaintop or in a city or whatever else, and it really helps bring the feel of everything to life, and it's lush. And considering that this is a map of the entire world and this detail is reflected throughout the entire world, I can imagine that a lot of effort and a lot of work went into making sure everything looks good, and it really is appreciated, and it really looks fantastic. Soundtrack wise, things are pretty good. I mean, you get your standard fare of Victorian era songs, and there's a couple of them and they repeat themselves over and over again, and they're fine and they sound epic, and they're nice to listen to for the first 15 or so hours, but eventually you might find yourself either turning the music off, just tuning it out, or do what I do, which is just open up iTunes and play my own music. Now, before we move into our wrap-up section, I just want to say a quick word about the tutorials in this game. Paradox is rather infamously known for not providing the best tutorials to the rather complicated games. This changes in Victoria 2, however, because it gives you a bevy of tutorials ranking from beginner to intermediate to advanced concepts, covering all the key ideas of the game. All the key things you need to know are covered. And I can really vouch for these tutorials because I hadn't played the first Victoria 2. I came into this game not really knowing how to play it, but I sat down with these tutorials, and after about an hour or so going through them, I knew what I was doing. And this game may seem complicated, but once you really get a handle on it and once you know what you're doing, it's really not so bad. So, I just want to say, while this game may look kind of intimidating to some people, these tutorials will allow you to get the handle you need on the game, to know what you need to know, and do what you need to do. So, where do we stand with Victoria 2? as I said before, the core gameplay of Victoria 2, that is, you taking control of government and dictating what's going to go on economically, militarily, diplomatically, and so on and so forth, is expertly done. You really do feel like you're the head honcho of your nation of choosing, and you're interacting with the world and influencing it in ways that you see fit. And like I said, that's the most important part of the game. Where the game begins to falter, however, is in the AI, both internally and externally, and also I would have appreciated a little bit more structure in the form of historical events, rather than the more sandbox kind of style the game presents. But as it stands, Victoria 2 is a great game. I feel that it is Paradox's best game since Europa Universalis 3, but it isn't quite up to par with some of the company's masterpieces, such as the previously mentioned EU3 and Hearts of Iron 2. But if Paradox can fix some of the issues I had with Victoria 2, I think it could hold its own with the best of the best. I can comfortably recommend this game to fans of grand strategy games, fans of history who love to geek out over the what-if questions, or anyone who has wondered what it would be like to be the head of a country during the 19th century. If that doesn't sound like you, then Victoria 2 probably isn't your cup of tea. I'm giving Victoria 2 an 8.5 out of 10. I know most people on Gamers Arcadia use grades, but the fans found it kind of confusing, so I switched back to numbers. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and you guys take care.